which I absolutely love, and it's something along the lines that people who love peace need to organize as well as people who love war. And you can take war in any context, right? And, it could be around business, it could be in our communities, it could be in our countries. It's about pulling things together business-wise. How do we organize together like-minded people who are purposeful in their intentions and want to use business as a force for good, which is really, kind of my thing. And I'm not alone. There are millions and billions of us who think that way. But it's about bringing together all the different movements that are popping around the world who have that same drive and determination, and ultimately a sense of responsibility for self. Well, like anything, it's contagious. And actually, interestingly enough, if we look at the neuroscience around this, which, for me, I love to, as our understanding of neuroscience and neuroplasticity grows, so we understand the why we do stuff so much better. And, I could warble on about, the waftiness of how great energy and how we can do it together, but if we just look at the science behind it, the science that we know today, when I'm right and I make somebody else wrong, I get a massive hit of dopamine. So it fuels that fire, it fuels that anger. But really it's anger without real, concrete, positive action. Sometimes one can harness anger and use it positively. But if it's just anger flaying around, really all that people are doing is getting this hit of dopamine. Whereas if we use empathy, which is just such an amazing thing, we all get a hit of serotonin. And the problem with actually, being right and making other people wrong and this polarization, black and white, up and down, left and right, it's madness, really, is that in getting my hit of dopamine and making somebody else or another group wrong, or another business or a country or a leader or whatever it might be, I'm actually robbing the other of their hit of dopamine, and they're going to fight back. That's what causes the conflict. Whereas if I find the empathy in it, which is I can actually get why the other person is doing it. I don't have to agree. That's the beautiful thing about empathy. But I can get what's going on. So if I understand what's driving that person, then we have a much better chance of both getting that hit of serotonin and finding a better way forward for everybody. But it has to have that intention of I want to move forward. Because we can all sit in anger and be so right, justifiably right. However, it's not going to get any of us anywhere. And I think this is the year that we've got to get on with moving forward, taking responsibility for self, as I said. Because without that action of coming together and using that force as a power for good in whichever direction you want, whatever it is that you want to fix, don't sit back and complain about it. Do something. Organize, get together, move forward. There are enough like-minded people out there for whatever it is that you want to achieve. I'm a big fan of trendwatching.com. I work a lot with trends, futures, foresight, that type of thing. And if we look at their 2020 report, one of the key issues is burnout. And so I think the United Nations, it was in May this last year, 2019, actually classified burnout as a thing. So it's been formally classified as a thing. And interestingly enough, I was contacted by a colleague through conscious leadership, conscious business in Germany, and they've just set up a clinic for burnout, where they have 18 beds for people who've actually clinically burnt out. And it's not a light thing. I've actually worked with some clients who've experienced that. And it's a really difficult journey to come back from. But if we consider that amount of stress that we're creating for ourselves inadvertently, and for others, is pushing us all to the brink of burnout, then it's something we should really take quite seriously, because we can't think straight when we are so stressed. What happens is our brain chemicals shut down and we just narrow on that point of focus. Everything narrows down to deal with that issue of stress. And we don't have possibility thinking. We don't have the brain chemistry to allow us to think of solutions that are outside of our normal thinking, and that's what we need to solve the problems that we have today. We can't just continue to think about them in the way that we might have before, because the world is changing so rapidly, and the stresses are, we live this switched on, always on lifestyle. We're always on, we're always reachable, we're always, on our phones and apps and on the phone and in meetings. When do we have some downtime, and when do we process this type of stuff? And if we're super stressed and everything's just focused in on solving that one point, we don't have the freedom to come up with better, smarter ways of doing stuff. So all in all, it's bad for the individual, it's bad for whoever they're fighting with. It's bad for business, it's bad for community. There isn't a single thing that's good about it. If you're going to harness that energy, use it in a powerful, positive way. So if we take anger energy, which is kind of a life force energy, it can be used in two ways. And I think that's the thing we've got to realize as human beings. Whatever energy I have, I can use it in two ways. I can use that as a force for good, so anger would probably turn into passion, passionate drive towards something that you want to achieve. And we need that energy. We need that connectedness to what it is that we want to achieve. But a lot of people are just railing against something, moving away from, railing against, rather than taking the time to work out what they do want and using that powerful, forceful energy to move towards that thing. Of course, the pressures of leading teams, leading a business, building business, finding solutions to today's issues. And we're dealing with a lot of complexity today. It's very different to 5 years ago, or 10, or 15. And I think this is what people in business are feeling. Without a doubt, there's so much more stuff happening. And it's happening in a way that we've never experienced before. So, I think every individual, leaders at all levels, whoever we are and whatever part we're playing in working with other people, we've got to set it, we've got to get right within ourselves, because there's no point in having that unconscious behavior bleeding into your teams. And you're just not creating, the point of teams is to be able to use that collective force to actually, move the market, to move forward, to find better, smarter ways of doing things. So I think a lot of people hunker down on what they know, and the base at the base of all of this is fear. What if I can't get it right? What if I can't find a solution? What if I can't meet my deadlines, my budgets? What if we fail ultimately, if we just strip it away? And unfortunately, that fear can lead us into settling back into what we know rather than reaching out and exploring. So I think we all have a responsibility of the minute that we're working with others, and that responsibility is to wake up, get conscious, work on self. That will then enable us to lead other people and to build a culture of exploration and innovation and creativity. Innovation and, creativity, innovation, everybody thinks of as this sort of shiny thing out there that perhaps creative people do. And yet I know very many creative, innovative accountants, for example. It doesn't really matter what profession you're in. Innovation is just ideation, so having an idea, implementation, putting it into action, lots of iterations, breaking it fast, prototyping, finding better, smarter ways of doing stuff, and that then leads to what we would call an innovation. So it's a simple process. You have an idea, you put it in action, you mess around with it until it works, and then that's the innovation. And if we want our teams to be full of ideas, and we've got to build a culture, an environment that says, okay, this is a breeding ground for great ideas. Bring the ideas, we'll test them out, we'll try them out. Because I think it's the only way that collectively no one person has the answers. And if we become that sort of staunch leader who's not open to suggestion or ideas or innovation that's coming out of the team, we really are backing ourselves into a horrible, hideous, little stressful corner. And there's a far better way of doing it. As leaders, we all go through 3 phases of development, and it always works like this, and then it's another iteration, then we do it all over again. And it starts with self-awareness. When I do that thing, I do that thing, that's kind of a thing I do. And then it moves on to self-knowledge. Okay, when I do that thing, it kind of happens in these circumstances, and the outcome is X, so the lights are starting to switch on. And then the third phase is self-mastery. So when that thing happens, and I'm about to do that thing again, what do I choose, despite my thinking and feelings? Because our thoughts and our feelings can change, and they do rapidly. People fall in love and they get divorced. They love that person, and then sometimes it turns into something completely different. So we change our feelings about things all the time, and we change our thoughts about things all the time. We may think a leader is the best leader ever, and then we spend some time working with them, and it's a very different story. So we shouldn't put so much faith in what we think or feel. What we need to be able to do is to get to that point of so much self-knowledge and self-awareness that we have self-mastery. And that self-mastery is it's a break in the habitual way of thinking. That nanosecond, I always think of it as Pavlov's dogs, push button, salivate. And it's the break, it's the nanosecond in the middle that says, what do I choose? What is the best thing to do in these circumstances? Despite my feeling, my fear, my, stress, my, everything's coming at me and I don't know what to do with this stuff. What is the right thing to do in this situation? And that freedom of thought comes with that relentless self-development, conscious development. So for me, it's all about taking ourselves on that journey. And just when we think we've got it, something else will come along and we'll have to go through those 3 phases again. So it is this constant movement and constant growth and a real determination to do that for ourselves and then assist other people to do it. Because it's only out of that freedom of thought, that space that leaves us free of our own habitual ways of doing things, that the energy to think of creative ways of doing stuff and to encourage it in others, that freedom of thought, I always think of it as big sky thinking, freedom, that only happens when we're not so self-involved that we can't choose something different. Yeah, very much the old way of thinking. I don't think today there are too many organizations that can attract the best talent if that is the culture and the thinking. And culture is top-down. We establish the thinking of the organization, the culture of the organization, the personality, the DNA, through our thinking as leaders. And if we consider that it doesn't matter what we're leading, a team, an initiative, a bunch of clients, could be suppliers, whatever it is, we're responsible for the environment that we create and the culture that's perpetuated. So it comes back to taking full responsibility. Culture doesn't just emerge on its own. It's not sort of, happenstance. It's something that is created. And if we created it one way, we can actively create it another. I mean, we're amazing human beings. We can do pretty much anything that we want. So if we look at healthy cultures in organizations that breed this kind of creativity, innovation, breaking it time and time again, all the iterations of breaking fast and trying stuff out and, let's find a better, smarter way and let's bring in the brightest minds. That kind of culture is going to attract, I'm an ex-global headhunter, so, attracting talent is a key issue. We can't do it alone. We need the best, brightest minds to work with us. And people like that will not be attracted to an old school, you will do this and you will do it this way and don't bring your ideas, just do what I tell you to do. That's not breeding anything that can survive in today's world of work. I think this really is founded in a determination to build teams and organizations systemically, because we don't just exist in some sort of bubble. We are all part of the ecosystem. So the culture that we build in our organizations, which is represented by our own thinking and how we go about doing stuff, really dictates the types of suppliers we work with, our partners in business, the clients who are attracted to our brand because we're living and breathing it. And there's this concept around glass box brands that because of social and digital media and the transparency that exists today, we should imagine that our brands are, our organizations, our internal culture is transparent to the outside world. And people can see exactly what's going on and they're going to choose whether they want to be involved as a client, as a customer, as a partner, as an investor, and the knock-on effect of that. So if we're not thinking systemically around individuals, teams, organizations, and their entire ecosystem, all of their stakeholders. In the old days, we used to think of our stakeholders as our investors, our boards, and depending on whether you're a publicly listed company or a startup, of course, your stakeholders may look slightly different. But today we're saying, okay, what about the environment and what about society at large? Whatever we are doing, we've got to understand the impact of what we're doing on all of those other elements. And conscious companies, for example, are just organizations who have decided to measure their impact on the big areas of society and the big area of environment. And we can't ignore it anymore. You know, it's not going away. It's not something out there. It's not a nice thing to do. It's, you know, it's not a nice to have. It's a must have. And if organizations are not thinking this way, the chances of them surviving this, the chances of them growing, you know, and surviving are extremely limited. It's really interesting because I think of when I first started work and I was working in London, and you know, things have changed dramatically over the just in my working life. I mean, I can remember I nearly got fired for wearing a trouser suit to work, you know? And the CEO called me into his office and he said, "Go home, get changed, put on a skirt, and if you don't bother coming back to work." And I did. I went home, I put on a skirt, and I remember just thinking, this is ridiculous. You know? But I was working in the city in London, and that was the dress code. So women in trouser suits, it wasn't a thing. And it was very patriarchal, it was very top-down, it was very, very different. Today's world of work, that can't survive in today's world of work. We still see different patterns in different places, so I don't want to sort of brand whole countries, but there are common denominators, you know, in terms of our thinking and how it's emerging. So if we're looking at, if we look at the States, well, it's not necessarily the same in New York and San Fran and Silicon Valley as it might be in Middle America, perhaps. You know, you're still going to get a whole range of thinking and leadership styles. What is emerging, without a doubt, is that the stresses of the always-on economy and lifestyle that we're all living are far too great to keep up with that old school thinking, the old school top-down. We can't do it on our own, and the leader doesn't have all the knowledge. You know, if we think of how professions have changed, how AI is creeping into many of the things that were done by, let's say, junior accountants in the past, or lawyers. You know, each industry has areas that actually are better automated, you know, if we think of it like that. I saw a report recently that said, you know, don't worry about robots stealing your job. For every job that's lost, 1.75 will be created. We just don't have a name for them yet. We don't know what they are yet. So there's a lot of fear-mongering around that. Nothing sort of happens overnight. And we need to think of technology and AI as augmenting our business today, because that's actually what it's doing. And we need to also think about our thinking and the skills that we have and what's best suited not only for today but moving forward. So old-style leadership, yes, it still exists. I would say that those types of organizations typically, I would imagine, are going to have to shift and change quite quickly if they are going to retain market share or even try and grow it. And the other statistic I heard today, I think it was out of Harvard Business Review, was that, you know, the traditional style organizations, the big lumbering, global listed type companies, 50%, in 10 years' time, 50% will still be around, and probably not in the shape and form that we have them today. So the change is exponential. It's happening far quicker. If we're sitting in our own little experience of life, it may not seem that fast. But when you take a view and you step out, you can see how styles are changing, leadership styles are changing to meet the demands of the environment that we're working in. And also young people are, you know, millennials are growing up, and within 10 years, you know, there'll be a whole wave of old school. I'm not saying everybody at a certain age group is old school, not at all, but the remnants of that will be moving out and things will be shifting in. And this is the way the world works. So we can resist it, we can fight, or we can get with the program. We're all capable of thinking and being any which way we want to. It's about deciding what that looks like and then getting on with making that happen. Yeah, so it makes me laugh when you say older people, because I am older people. And the fascinating thing about neuroscience is we're starting to disprove a lot of things that we believed. So we know today that it doesn't matter what age you are. Your brain can regenerate, the brain cells can regenerate at exactly the same pace as they've always done. So you can certainly augment your ability to do that with things like meditation. And they've shown that 50-year-olds who meditate every day, 20 minutes doesn't, and it could be, meditation in action. It could be taking a walk, painting. It could be, some yoga. It could be, anything, playing golf. That could be a meditative action. Anything like that. For the sort of average 50-year-old who spends 20 minutes a day doing it has the same brain capacity, if we call it that, as a 25-year-old. So it's no different. I think what happens over time is that we can get stuck in habitual ways of thinking. And we can change that at a moment's notice. It just takes a bit of determination and some self-discipline. So this idea of old people not being with it or not being able to work in today's economy is absolute nonsense. So number one, we shouldn't accept that for ourselves. And number two, we need to be careful about branding whole groups of people. Because number one, scientifically, it's not true. Number two, it's down to the individual. The other thing is that we've seen some interesting research around the fact that most successful entrepreneurs are in their early 40s, not in their 20s. So if we look at the numbers of businesses that are started and those that are still around after a year, I think I worked for listed companies for the first half of my career, and the first entrepreneurial thing I did was to open an executive search business in London, working with the venture capital community around startups. So it was, I think with every iteration or chapter of one's career, we learn so much, and it's invaluable. But one of the interesting things around that is that we're led to believe in today's society, I think the media play it up quite a lot, that it's young people who are successful entrepreneurs. And that's actually not true. We need to have some skin in the game. We need to have failed, as you said earlier, many times. And, failure isn't a big thing. Science is just one big epic failure, if we think about it, because we're constantly disproving what we knew to be true before. When I was growing up, my parents would always say to me, you can't argue with science, And I would say, but you must. And I still feel the same way. And if we think about it like that, we've got a very different understanding or mindset around age. Because if your most successful entrepreneurs, statistically, are in their early 40s, it tells us that you've got to start, you've got to go somewhere and fail again, and there'll be lots of successes in the middle of that. But each time we fail, we're actually learning something invaluable that we'll use more wisely the next time. So I think a lot of the ideas about age, number one, what happens to our brains, number two, how successful we are in business at different ages, is absolute nonsense. And we've just got to chuck it out and unlearn that rubbish. So for me, it's having this attitude of lifelong learning, always being a learner, always being a student of life. I think if we, the only thing that can limit us is our own thinking about ourselves, the limits we place on ourselves. So if we have this, if the context that we live in is one of lifelong learning, then, and curiosity is such a beautiful thing. I've been batting on about curiosity for the last 15 years. If we can keep the curiosity hat on, we have less, we don't polarize so easily. We don't make right and wrong so easily. It's kind of curious. People will do something strange or weird or things that we don't agree with, and we can just get kind of curious about it. I wonder why they did that. So we're not so attached to everything. And with that comes a real feeling of interconnectedness of everything. So for me, I'm a real pattern thinker. I'm looking for the interconnectedness of stuff all the time. This thing happens here. How does that affect that? What about this? Have we thought about that? And I think that if you can foster that thinking within yourself, it's big picture thinking, then really it doesn't really matter what you want to do or how you want to do it. You're constantly going to be working through iterations of what that could look like. And those ideas will come, that creativity, how can I put it together, and who are the right people to get it done? That thinking can carry you into anything you want, and that change is really easy if you maintain that as a sort of a lifelong way of looking at business, at solutions, at problems, at things going on around the world. Without a doubt, if we have 51% of the world population, being women, it's complete madness that we're not employing that mindset in business. We know that organizations that have more balance of men and women are far more profitable, far more successful, because we need each other. This is the craziness. Men shouldn't be women and women shouldn't be men energetically, and we're not trying to replace each other, but to bring together those powerful energies that complement each other so well to solve problems, to find better solutions to issues, to build, to grow. And, we're really wasting a lot of resource by not using what we've got. It's complete madness to me. But as a young person working my way through business, I guess the way that I found around the gender issue was to just, work harder, be smarter, outperform, all of that type of stuff. So that I wasn't squashed into a way of doing or being that just didn't suit me personally. And it didn't. So yes, the feeling of rebellion would rise a lot of anger against, and I wasn't alone in that thinking. But that's pointless energy. How do we use that energy to then, get ahead and do the stuff we want to do? So I think, without a doubt, the most successful woman that I deal with, and this is a point that I got to personally in business, was that I don't even see gender. I don't see gender and I don't see color. I see the person, I see what they contribute, I see how we can work together, how we can actually make something bigger than, just one person or two, or one team or two teams, or whatever it may be. And that, I didn't have that realization until much later in my career, that I just don't, I've never worn the gender issue as a victim. I'm not a victim of gender, It's never been in my consciousness. And I think that's kind of it seems like a minor point, but the most successful women that I deal with in business also just have never considered gender to be an issue. It's never been an excuse for anything. You just get on with it and you find a way forward. Diversity is unbelievably important, and I think people mix up diversity and values. In my years of headhunting many different countries, one thing I absolutely understood is that if we've got a good values match, that then allows for diversity. And if we have a bad values match, if it's not aligned, it's always a disaster. And if you find yourself in an organization where your values you've discovered, because often, what you think you're getting into and what you get into may be different, then my suggestion is get out quickly, because there's never a good ending to it. So the key thing that organizations, without a doubt, need to build is powerful values that people understand, they can adhere to, and then the diversity can work well, as long as you match the values. So what are your values as an organization? What do you value? And it's not a mission and values statement, dreamt up by marketing. It's what are the core values of this organization, and how do we follow that through in all the DNA of this organization, all our actions, our behaviors, how we go about putting our deals together, who we deal with, the entire ecosystem. It has to radiate from the middle outward. So for me, without diversity, we really, we're just not tapping into the ability to come up with creative solutions and get on with them. We talked a little bit about innovation. So that is critical. But at the core of that, if you get the values, I always think of it as the golden thread in an organization and in a person. Without a doubt, values speak louder than words. It's what you do, it's not what you say. And if you can get that lined up, then the ability to actually use that diversity with that common golden thread, is very powerful. It allows for that expansion. So this question around values actually comes back to culture, right? So at the core of any culture is a set of values. And they're not a set of pronounced values. Sometimes they're unsaid, but they're understood. And what I noticed in my years of headhunting is that, and this has happened to me too personally, is that I might have joined an organization, discovered that what I thought I was joining in terms of culture and values, even though I might not have had the words for it then, or the consciousness to understand the impact of that. No matter how hard I worked, or people don't join a company and try and fail. They're trying to do their best. They're trying to get on. They're trying to make their mark and grow and learn and earn at the same time. But if there was a values mismatch, within 18 months, people are a bit of a shell of themselves. There's not a lot left because it's exhausting trying to bend yourself into a shape that really isn't consistent with who you are. So the key thing, of course, is back to self. What are your values? And when you are looking at getting into an organization, joining an organization, or working with a supplier or a partner or what have you, the key thing is to make sure that there is a match, because things go horribly wrong when there isn't, and things tend to work out reasonably well or very well when there is. And I just think of mergers and acquisitions, M&A. Doing the deal is one thing. It's complex, and it's numbers and it's money, and it's all sorts of things go into that. But let's assume that doing the deal is difficult but easy, because it's a numbers game, right? The issue, of course, then, if we look at mergers, for example, or acquisitions either, is how do we get those two cultures to work well together? And that's often where things fail. So making sure that that's aligned, or at least reasonably well aligned, ensures the chance of success, a successful merger or acquisition, not just on paper, but in reality and practice. So I think we've got to start off with what are our values individually and collectively. If there is a bad match, and my advice to any individual is get out, go and find a good match. There are plenty of organizations out there. Find one that works with how you think and things that you value in life. And then, it's really about the entire ecosystem. Who are all of your stakeholders as an organization? Your investors, your suppliers, the media, all of the people that you have touch points with, that you work with. And work with people who are closely aligned, because otherwise the chances of success are pretty slim. I think we've got to think of organizations as living, breathing organisms rather than as a static, if I think of old school organizations, I always think of a monopoly in a building, kind of thing. And that's actually not what organizations are. They are living, breathing entities. So as living, breathing organisms, entities, we're constantly expanding and contracting depending on what's going on. And that fluidity needs to be built into our cultures too. If we know what values, that golden thread, that DNA of the organization is, we're going to attract like-minded people naturally anyway. So we've got to extend that into our hiring policy. And often if organizations are static, if they're like that building or that block on Monopoly, where it's sort of the old-fashioned, sort of static thing, yes, you are going to get people who've been around for a long time and are part of the furniture, and probably can exist in that space, forevermore. And that's the type of organization that it is, and they want to stay that way. All well and good. I'm not sure how, depending on the type of business, of course, but it's probably not the business of today. It's probably not going to work as effectively or be able to grow and evolve in the way that it needs to. But for most organizations today, it is a living, breathing entity. And the chances of somebody just sitting in a role for 30 years, with incremental, salary and, different titles and on we go, it's just not something that we see much of anymore. And yeah, I guess it depends on the type of organization you want to grow and, what your purpose is in the marketplace, what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, there'll always be some deadwood. I mean, I think the common statistic we throw at organizations, whether it's, I've yet to see any real research around this, is that 20% of the people produce, all of the magic. And we don't need everybody to be magic makers. There need to be, people who are good, solid backbone in organizations, because we are living, breathing entities. We need a bit of everything. But deadwood typically would be difficult to sustain in an organization that is trying to grow in today's markets. I started the business I have today 14 and a half years ago. It'll be 15 this May. And before that, of course, the headhunting years. And what I guess the distinct difference in the market today is the industry itself has changed quite dramatically. I think we're probably better at identifying what an organization needs in terms of looking at culture much more specifically, values, systems, assessments, making sure that we get the right match. It's very expensive to hire people that don't stick around, I mean, when I was headhunting, 15 years ago, the cost of hire per person in the UK, I think on average, was something like £30,000. Just an average number. So if somebody didn't stick around, and today, of course, if we get the wrong match and somebody, doesn't last, it's a very expensive mistake to make. But all sorts of other changes are happening in recruitment and headhunting, and that is, a lot of it is AI-driven, algorithm-driven. And I think that has some knock-on negative effects. So if you're not cookie-cutter, sort of standard degrees with standard routes through, sometimes the algorithm can miss you. So I would say, as an individual, just knowing that big organizations like Google and various others use a lot of algorithms to find the next, the next people. If you don't fit into the cookie-cutter view of what that looks like, get smart about it and find other ways to get to that organization, to get to the people in that organization, and to create an introduction. So yes, things have changed, and as with all emergence of digital and technology to assist various different roles, there are always teething problems in the beginning, and I think that's one of the big issues around finding yourself a job or getting hired. And also for organizations, we've discovered that there is a lot of inherent bias written into some of those algorithms. If we consider that 7% of computer science graduates last year in the US were women, that gives us an indication that 93% of our AI was written by young white American men. Does that apply in different countries? Does it apply? Yeah, so we've got to really think about the tools that we're using to find the best talent for our organization. And if you're the one looking for a role, have a little think about how, if you don't fit into the algorithmic system, how you might better get to the people that you need to talk to directly. And I think relationships, without a doubt, are key. So, I know we live in this crazy digital world, and we'd rather, thumb for hours than pick up the phone. And I would argue that don't, do the one-to-one, find a way of actually connecting with people. And the other thing is, view yourself as a commodity. You've got something to offer. It's not just whether this company's going to buy me, it's whether you buy that company and whether you buy the value system that you want to get into, because it's going to dictate how you can actually grow and learn and, build yourself as a person in business going forward. The environment will really have a massive effect on you too. So, I still deal with clients around a lot of career changes, of course, and building businesses and bringing on teams. Today, I do a lot of that. And, it's don't take for granted things because they've been written somewhere and it's an easy way of getting stuff done. Don't take it for granted when it comes to your career or building your business. Make sure that it actually serves you and your business. And do the old-fashioned thing, build a relationship. So AI is creeping into almost every single field, and the one area that I'm really exploring at the moment is AI in coaching. And, if we think about it, coaching traditionally has lived at the top end. It's expensive in comparison to perhaps workshops and other group activities. It's one-to-one, and it's been the reserve of perhaps C-suite and partners, directors, entrepreneurs with multiple businesses. And it hasn't been available necessarily to everybody. So how do we democratize, coaching? And one of the interesting things that's happening in my field around that is that we're starting to see AI-driven coaching, self-coaching, which is amazing. And I'm actually a practitioner for Lumina Learning, who have an assessment suite. And they're a real disruptor in the market. They've turned it on its head completely. And one of the things that they are launching soon is an AI-driven coach model that's actually based initially on assessment. So you've got some science behind it, which I think is really important, because otherwise it's very subjective. And then you've got the coaching module, which is available to you anywhere. So I think this need for coaching on demand, as and when you need it. I mean, you're going into a big meeting, perhaps feeling slightly out of your depth, or there's some key questions or things going on that you don't know how to handle, or you just want somebody to bounce some ideas off. How do you achieve that normally? It's very difficult in the old formal, ways that coaching is delivered. You meet with your coach once a week, the time is set, and, unlike a mentor, you really, picking up the phone and just getting a quick answer is not really available to you. So I think AI, without a doubt, is also disrupting my industry. And I'm pretty keen to work with it and see how we can actually democratize coaching and make it available to everybody, people at all levels who are looking for that, the rigors of professional coaching versus people's opinions and subjective ideas of what should be done. And because, of course, that will differ, depending on who you call for advice. So yeah, it's really interesting. I was involved in a recent call with one of the top leadership professors in a business school that I lecture for occasionally, and he was talking very much about the systems coaching. How do we coach in a systemic way? How do we coach into the systems that people work into? So traditionally, coaching very much focused on the individual, with very little understanding, so without taking the entire ecosystem into consideration. And yes, we've had leadership 360s for a long time. A lot of them are quite contrived. They work into the organization. Very few people are going to criticize their boss, if you think about it. I know I would have hesitated to do that as a young person in business. And, how do we then work into the ecosystem that the client works into, their ecosystem, their suppliers, their clients, the media that they work with, all of these different avenues. And looking at things in a much broader perspective, while still enabling the client to operate, across that spectrum in a healthier way. So yeah, it's shifting and changing, and I'm pretty excited to be involved and to look at how we can actually get the beautiful disciplines of that out to many more people. For me, it's such a fundamental thing. It's such a simple thing. It's not complicated. It's invest in yourself. If we don't know ourselves well, we can't manage ourselves proactively in a situation. And think of that knowing oneself. I often joke, and I think, don't take ourselves too seriously, but for me it's know thyself and then get thyself the hell out of the way. Because if we're constantly fighting with ourselves internally, there's very little energy or freedom of thought or ability to expand or come up with better, smarter ways of doing stuff if the focus is internal. So know thyself and then get thyself the hell out of the way. So embark on something where you're learning about yourself, where you're growing, where you are making progress in terms of becoming a more rounded, human being who can be of service to others and self. So for me, it's simple. It's not complicated at all. You don't have to do 1,000 flick-flacks, faster than anybody else. It's just get grounded, get to know yourself well through whatever it is that gives you joy, whatever path you find. And know that, I often think of this too will pass. If you're going through difficult times, this too will pass. And definitely connect with others. We can't do it alone. We're not meant to do it alone. We're meant to do it together. So find people that you can collaborate with. And really go back to that, the building relationships with other people, connecting with others, collaborating, co-creating, all of these codes that we've been hearing about over recent years. So without a doubt, invest in yourself. If you need to bring on new skills or you need to learn something new, take the risk, go and do it. It's never too late. And through that process, know yourself, manage yourself better, so that you're not spending the time second-guessing all the time. I do this because I always think of monkey mind going round and round in circles. What a waste of energy, beautiful energy that you could be using to actually get on and build something that you want. And then take risks, fail again, take some chances. You'll always take something good out of that situation and be able to use it effectively later on. I throw this out as a sort of a light way of dealing with it. Know thyself and then get thyself the hell out of the way. I think this goes back to what I was talking about before, that, all human development, all growth and development for ourselves, self-development, it goes through layers. It starts with self-awareness. Oh, I do that thing. And then it moves on to, oh, when I do that thing, this thing happens. Or I do that thing in these circumstances or under these stresses. And then self-mastery, which says, well, what do I choose despite those, my thoughts and my feelings about something? What is the right thing to do? So when I say know thyself and get thyself the hell out of the way, what I mean is constantly go through those iterations of learning about yourself, the self-awareness, the self-knowledge, know thyself. And then the self-mastery is get thyself the hell out of the way, because we really shouldn't be letting our egos drive our lives. And if we're able to get to that point of consciousness where we can get ourselves off the table and out of the way and get on with what needs to be done, there's so much freedom in that, and so much creativity, the innovation flows, all sorts of beautiful things arise out of that. I mean, we know that in any given situation where we have any conflict or difficulty, we have played a part in that. It's impossible not to be part of that. So the question is, okay, what was my part in that? What do I need to do to line that up? And then get rid of it. So we don't need to work in that headspace. It's really about a mindset. And I think that, that constant striving to not get caught up in our own stories, our own dramas, our own, all of the stuff that can really hold us back if we don't have that conscious awareness of self-mastery. So that's what I mean by getting ourselves out of the way and getting on with it. When I started my business in 2005, I specialized in personal brand, people as brands. And 2005 may sound very early for something like that, and I was extremely early to market. But I could see that with Facebook starting in 2004 and the world moving into a much more digital space, I could see that people were brands. And one of the big light bulb moments that happened during my headhunting years was that some people just had presence. They had this extraordinary self-confidence and presence. They weren't better qualified. They, hadn't done anything smarter or greater than anybody else. But they just stood out. And I wanted to know what that thing was. What is that thing? And I realized that there was a process in finding that, a methodology which I built around it, to help people to actually build that presence, that impact that they needed in business. So it's not the smart, shiny labeling on the tin, it's the contents. And I've always believed that in order for us to get ahead or to change in any way, something has to shift within. So the being drives the doing. And way too often we're so focused on trying to change our behavior or somebody else's behavior or our team's behavior or the organization's behavior. If only they would behave differently, life would be wonderful. But what I realized was that it's really time consuming, and very difficult to change behaviors, belief systems, values of others and of our, ourselves. But if we can create a shift within ourselves, within our being, then all of our actions and behaviors are effortless and in the right direction. We don't have to second guess ourselves all the time. So for me, all the work that I do is focused on helping people to actually shift something internally that allows that that behavior and the actions as a result of their thinking to move in the right direction and to enable them to achieve what they want to achieve. But it has to come back to that that rootedness in knowing self. Once again, it comes back to that. So if we're locked in ego or what we should be or could be, we're not rooted in anything that is authentic. And other people get it far quicker than we realize. We can't really, perhaps once or twice we can pull the wool over somebody else's eyes, trying to be something that we're not. But it's impossible to keep up that drama. And it's exhausting, So who am I, And once I get that, and I'm on this constant learning cycle, this lovely lifelong learning with deep curiosity about life, I become unshackled from the exhaustion of this monkey mind, this ego going on and on and on, and trying to be something that I'm not. Know who you are, and then make the very best of it. That's what it all boils down to. And we all have something amazing to add value to our own lives, our families, our communities, our businesses, and beyond. What is that thing? If you spend a lifetime perfecting that, crafting the best version of you, then I think we've done okay. Micromanagement leadership styles, if you're trying to build something scalable, it's near impossible, right? You can't be everywhere doing everything, and there's no way that you can be an expert in everything. And the whole point is, once you know yourself and can get yourself the hell out of the way, then you'll know exactly who you need to bring in and what you need to do to augment the power of the collective, because it is a collective that gets stuff done brilliantly. It's never on your own. It's always collaborating with others or finding synergy and working together in smarter ways. So this idea of being able to be all things to all people is madness. We absolutely need to bring in, but then again, once again, we need to find that golden thread of values. Get that right, and then bringing in those different skills and the experience and the richness of the collective. Means that together we can solve problems, we can find better ways of doing stuff, we can innovate, we can get creative. And the other thing is, don't just think of your team. Think of bringing in as a leader, think of bringing in outside experts who can give different perspectives on different parts of your business and infuse ideas that already exist. In most major organizations, the best ideas come from within the organization. However, the environment in the organization doesn't allow them to unfold. So there are a lot of bright, smart, creative, innovative people who have fantastic ideas about how to do their job better, or parts of their job, or something within the organization. And they end up, perhaps trying to get their ideas forward, and they've got nowhere to land. And, off they go, and often this is the history of, very successful startups. They'll get really frustrated, they'll go off, they'll find an investor and get some VC money, and then the company that actually lost them will have to buy that piece of innovation back. So it's, you've got to create that culture of innovation within an organization to foster this kind of thinking. And always bring in outside thinking, outside expertise, to really fuel that, to help it to grow. With major global listed organizations, they're traditionally not designed to foster innovation. They're designed to, which is why their M&A departments are huge, right? That's, you buy in, something that's going to take you to the next level or what have you. And major organizations are really focused on making sure that whatever they're delivering, the quality is consistent time and time again, from a legal and from a sort of back office perspective. They're brilliant at making sure that there is that consistency throughout policy, etc., etc. So, I mean, I've actually got a fantastic friend who's in San Fran who helped one household name listed company to actually set up a situation where they part-funded ideas, but outside of the organization. And then the person with the innovative idea who'd originated from within the company would have to find funding somewhere else, bootstrap it or find some VC funding or what have you, with an option to buy back. And that seems to be a pretty healthy way that these organizations are actually dealing with innovation. I think most major organizations have had innovation hubs and what have you, or, tried incubating ideas within the organization. But I am talking global listed companies, so perhaps a different environment altogether. And I think that, unfortunately, because the culture doesn't support that, it doesn't have that innovation culture throughout the organization, it's very easy for that to drown and get lost. And that raw, driving, striving energy to create and break things fast and, fail and fail again, really isn't supported. So there's got to be there have to be smarter ways of doing it. For SMEs and, people who are perhaps multiple entrepreneurs and what have you, very different stories. So we've got to look at the ecosystem, we've got to look at the culture, the organization, and it's not always saying you're wrong, you've got to change that, but that needs to exist for the purpose that it is there for and why it does particularly well. But we will also want to foster this other thing, so let's come up with a smarter way of doing that thing that isn't tethered or drowned out by the culture that exists for something that is meant to be global and consistent and what have you. I have to say I'm so lucky to have found something that I absolutely love doing, and I learn every single day from my clients, and it's so diverse. I mean, one of my clients I've been working with for the last year is a genome advisory in New York, and I'm helping their leadership team to build their business. And what I've learned around that is all about ethics, because there's very little that medicine and science can't or won't be able to do. However, we haven't written the ethics for any of this stuff. The laws haven't been written, the legalities haven't been dealt with, the borders haven't been defined. So for every single step in innovation around science, certainly around genomics and medicine, science goes, wow, yay, I mean, that's just awesome. And ethically, humanity goes, oh my gosh, where is that going? That the impact of that could be something else. So I think for me, when I'm taking on a client, partly it's obviously what the client needs, but I really believe that I'm working in partnership with clients today, because it's also about, what can I learn and what can I bring to the table and how can I assist them to think outside the box or create a new box, because the box theory doesn't work so well anymore. And recently I was in London delivering for one of the top 3 music companies globally, and an international team, an amazing team dealing with artists and artist management and what have you around the world. And they're tackling new new economies, new cultures, like Asia and Russia and Japan and, a whole variety of things, and helping them to really be able to work in a more powerful way and really looking at diversity of teams. About a year ago, so I think I mentioned earlier, every couple of years I go off and qualify in some other thing because I find it enormously interesting. And I also believe that it's going to be of huge impact to my clients, and I need to be able to assist my clients to navigate this world of work, today and moving forward. So a few years ago, I studied futures and strategic foresight and how to think about the multiple futures rather than our sort of traditional one-track strategy. And then last year, and I design thinking and systems thinking. And last year, I became a qualified practitioner with Lumina Learning and contributed to their new innovation module. And that is really looking at how can we innovate? What does innovation mean for teams? And we talked quite a lot about that. And bringing in this kind of knowledge to this music company, which you go from genomics to music, and you think that there's a huge difference. And actually, really, yes, there might be an application, but there isn't really in terms of how we work well together and how we understand each other and how we can actually use the skills that exist in the team and create an environment for innovation. So, yeah, I'm constantly, my big key thing when taking on new clients is, can we work well together? Is there chemistry? Can we work in partnership together? Can I help them to actually achieve exponential growth? And and then we get going and we dig in, and I can't think of anything more satisfying to do. So I think after many years of trying different things and different chapters in my career, I think I've finally found my groove and the thing that gets me out of bed happily in the morning.